Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fallacious Truth Storytime Edition. Today we're going to be taking a look at another story that I found on the internet. Once we're done and throughout, we'll go ahead and see what we can analyze it, see what we can glean from it. It is a rather long story, so I'm guessing this is probably going to be a two-parter, so stay tuned, sit back, and enjoy. I've read a lot of stories on here, and there are some definite heartbreaking stories that sadden me to read them. My story is also pretty sad, but I don't think that I'm able to convey it on the same level of bitterness and betrayal that some of the other writers and submitters have experienced. My story, of course, is sad, but also perhaps gives a different perspective that might be worth listening to. I'm not sure why I'm writing these events that took place so many years ago, but maybe it's just a way to show people that good things happen with time, and time and patience does seem to heal most things. I know this is a long post, but I think the history is important to know so people can understand what happened. And that generates my question and request for advice. Based on this, am I crazy to try again? And is it worthwhile at 60 years of age? I'm assuming it means getting back on the dating scene here, but I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't specify after that. I met my wife and we were together for almost 10 years, which includes 7 years of marriage. We have two children who are fully grown now and have lives of their own. My wife and I met on a blind date, and it was awkward the entire night. My wife is an attractive woman with a vivacious personality. Me, on the other hand, I'm somewhat reserved and wouldn't probably be considered as a head turner. I'm not that bad on the eyes, but do not in any way claim to be a heartbreak. I'm also on the quiet side, and my wife has always been the person that people notice at a party or an event. She also has a kind heart and is very empathetic to people and always looks for the good. Strangely enough, she seemed to like me and our relationship grew. We finally got married and began to build a life together. Our life was actually going very well. We had a nice home, good finances, supportive friends, and our kids were doing well. But, as with so many stories, there's always a catalyst that can change everything. Our catalyst was pregnancy. We had two young kids at the time and wanted to go for a third child to have an even larger, happier family. We never had too many concerns in the bedroom, and we quickly had number three on the way. I was elated when my wife told me the news, and we waited about 3 months before we told the rest of our families about the newest addition. During our next 3 months, we were busy with planning for the nursery, working with our kids, and getting ready for the new baby, looking at finances, etc. It was perhaps the saddest day of my life when my wife called to tell me that there's something wrong with the baby. We got her to the hospital. Unfortunately and tragically, my wife had a miscarriage at the 6-month mark. We were both traumatized, and the trip back home the next day was absolute silence and sadness. My wife went to bed that night and didn't come out of the room for the next 3 days. She was absolutely overcome with sadness and depression. For some reason, she also believed that she had failed me as a wife. I told her again and again that this was an act of God. She didn't do anything wrong, and we could try again when the time was right. But she did not believe me and still continued to blame herself for the whole situation and sunk into a deep depression. It took about 6 months, but she appeared to be coming out of her funk and seemed to be getting back to her normal self. We were both doing well with the kids. She seemed to have her personality back, and we were talking about the future. She also started exercising to get back in shape. She really did look incredible, and I enjoyed giving her compliments and telling her how much I loved her. During this time, she also talked to me about getting a part-time job. It was not so much about money, but more of a way for her to get out of the house and stay involved. I told her it was a great idea and encouraged her to think about what she wanted to do and then go for it. To my surprise, she got a job as a waitress and a... Oh my gosh. To my surprise, she got a job as a waitress and a bartender at a restaurant right down the street from us. Red flag number one here, folks. She has a degree in business but didn't want a white-collar job. I wonder why. She thought that the hours and responsibilities would be too much for our home and our family, but this would get her up and moving. She would be able to earn some money for herself and feel like she was contributing. Plus, she said that she needed to work and talk with adults, and she felt this would get her out of isolation at home. Once again, I told her that it was great news and she should go for it. Yeah, your wife working as a bartender. I'm not so sure about that. That can potentially lead to all kinds of problems. It's one thing to want to socialize with people to get out of your funk, as it's stated here, but you don't do it by being a bartender. Especially after you've just intentionally got back in shape. Now you want to be a bartender. Kind of starting to put two and two together. I'm surprised he didn't see this. Now, I noted earlier that my wife is an attractive woman. I should also add that she's a voluptuous woman and was looking really great with her level of fitness and weight loss. She has never had a problem attracting the interest from men, but she has always been loyal to me, and I never had any reason to doubt her. Well, it's either that or she put on a great facade and you simply never knew. She started her job and was doing well. She worked 2 to 3 nights per week and usually worked on Friday or Saturday. I was somewhat uncomfortable with her work outfits because she wore clothing that accentuated her figure. Well, that's understandable. I'd be uncomfortable with that too, anyone would. It was tasteful, but I admit that I wish she would be more conservative with the way she dressed. She laughed at me on this and said that it was a great way to bring in more tips, and perhaps her outfits would spur more romantic interest on my part. Well, I mean, right there, she just told us that she wants to get noticed, she wants more validation from other people, and she's currently unhappy with their married relationship. The owner of the restaurant was a good man and ran a good business. He was fair with his workers, and his family also all worked there. His son, to be honest, was somewhat of an arrogant jerk. He had been born into wealth and made no bones about living a nice lifestyle. He was about the same age as my wife, and I must admit, he was a very good-looking guy. He was married, but he had no children yet. His wife is a lovely and wonderful person as well. She also worked at the restaurant and handled the books. The son handled all of the catering and special events. At least that's what he was supposed to do. My understanding is that he was somewhat lazy and constantly dumped his responsibilities off on his family and co-workers. What he liked to do was lift weights, work out, drive around in his fancy car, live off of his family, and basically talk and brag about how great he was with women. I'm not sure how his wife dealt with all this. He was admittedly a flashy guy, but the guy did not impress me in the least. I could tell from the first time I met him that he was not much more than a big-mouth windbag. My wife several times had commented to me that he was a good-looking guy in an exciting way, but he was also an arrogant toe rag, whatever that is, and she could not stand him, but she had to work with him and keep her mouth shut to get along. She did work with him on a constant basis, and they then began to have some type of a friendship forming. I wasn't overly concerned, but did tell her that this guy was trouble and she should be careful around him. During the next several months, my wife did begin to act peculiar. She kept a very close eye on her phone, claimed that she had to work late. She began to be absent for long periods of time and claiming she was shopping or running errands. She also began to ignore me to some extent, and I also thought she was not as attentive to the kids as she had been in the past. My wife is a good mother, but she seemed to be impatient at this time, and really had no concern with turning over more of her responsibilities to me. It was a challenge since I work full-time and I'm the primary breadwinner of the family. I did tell her of my concern, but she told me things were going to be okay, and I was seeing problems where there weren't any at all. That's pretty typical. Remember, things are never her fault, and she has to point the blame somewhere else. One night, my wife and I were alone, and it was fairly late. I made a move on her, and she shut me down cold. I asked her what the problem was, and she started crying and shaking. I asked her what the problem was, and received the shock of my life. My wife had told me she had been seeing the owner's son for about 6 months now. Their relationship had turned sexual, and she loved him. We were done, and that she was going to leave me and move in with him. She also told me that she had been deeply unhappy since the miscarriage and felt that something in our marriage had died. She needed a fresh start and needed to be free to take over and live her own life. She also told me that she loved this guy and he could make her happy. I can't say I'm surprised. What probably happened was she wanted a third child because she was initially unhappy with the marriage to begin with. Because the third child didn't work out, she unfortunately had a miscarriage. And, for whatever reason, like most women, they think having another kid is going to solve all their problems. Well, because the child didn't successfully happen, she went looking elsewhere for her validation and her need and a reason for her being. If the story was out anywhere else, they would be chastising the man for doing something wrong and not making her feel fulfilled or some BS excuse like that. Because remember, folks, it's always the fault of the man. It's never the woman's fault because she can never be accountable to her own actions. I was obviously pretty shaken up and asked her to reconsider. Why on earth would you do that, man? Gosh, she already told you where her head's at and what she's doing, and she clearly doesn't give two shits about you. Or your kids, for that matter. Anyhow, I was obviously pretty shook up and asked her to reconsider. She told me that it was already too late for that, and she would be moving in with her new boyfriend into an apartment they had already secured. So she had already done this. I asked her about the kids, and she told me that it would be best if they stayed with me at the house to maintain a good home, and that she would just come and visit them. Is it an understatement to say that I was absolutely shocked and flabbergasted at what had taken place. My wife told me that she didn't understand the surprise since she thought that I was well aware of her unhappiness with our marriage and the miscarriage. And the miscarriage had been the final nail in the proverbial coffin. What this guy doesn't realize yet is that, I'm gonna make a second video here, and I'm gonna dive deep into these parts here. She is doing exactly, if she actually wanted to keep the kids, if she was gonna fight him for everything, this, that, and the third, she is doing the exact opposite of what she needs to do. And the reason why she's doing this is because she's still in that, going out honeymoon stage. She isn't thinking clearly, and she's going to realize this later down the road. But later down the road, I'm sorry to say, even though she is a woman, later down the road it's going to be too late for her to reconcile the mistakes that she's making. So yeah, I'm going to make a second video on this because this needs to be addressed and pointed out here. In one of my previous how to prep for divorce videos, I go into this type of a scenario in pretty good detail as to what you should not do as a man. She's doing exactly what you should not do if you want to keep your children, if you don't want to be seen in the eyes of the court as perpetuating legal abandonment. Legal abandonment, at least for a man, is, in the eyes of the court, one of the worst things you can do and is a surefire way to lose everything. Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for the Fallacious Truth. This is looking to be a four-parter here. It looks like it's going to be a three-part story, one-part analysis, maybe more. The analysis is going to be actually pretty interesting because I'm going to treat this as if this was a divorce that was sprung up on this man, and it clearly was. I'm going to tie it into my what you should do to prep for a divorce series. I'm going to deconstruct what this fella is telling us and tell you what you should do, when you should do it, and if the woman wasn't still in this infatuation stage, the steps you can take and what you should do to achieve the best outcome for yourself and your children. So you're not going to want to miss this. Please stay tuned. And always please like, share, and subscribe. I'll leave a link to part 2, 3, and what looks like it's going to be 4 down in the description here.